A weed is a plant that occurs outside its range. It can have effects on the amenity of an area as well as the environment, which is our main focus. There are several different types of weeds, but generally we class them into two different types, and that is woody weeds. So they're weeds with woody stems, such as coast tea tree or blackberry, and then herbaceous weeds, which have more flexible stems and a low lying. So things like fleabane, thistles.
Woody weeds are a major impact on our native vegetation, and the reason that they're a major impact is that they remove all the understory species. They are species that we don't quite understand how, but they have impacts on the other plant species. Maybe they have these chemicals that kill them. Maybe they shade out the understory species, and then they take over, and what we end up with is a monoculture. Whereas our native vegetation has got many layers.
The idea of layered vegetation we call complex vertical structure. It means we've got lots and lots of little layers that go vertically, not just when we look above, but go vertically. And animals love that. And when we do work in areas where we've got complex vertical structure, we get plenty of these little guys. In areas where it's been simplified by woody weeds, we don't get these native species. Some of them are EPEAT, they're nationally listed. They're really on the edge. What we do get is lots of foxes and cats, which are feral species which predate on these guys.
So the key benefits when we remove woody weeds is that it increases biodiversity throughout our ecosystems. It takes away that monoculture of habitat, which means that there's only an overstory as opposed to a beautiful layered ecosystem. It also, another key benefit is that it supports a diversity of wildlife for all the animals, birds, insects, a huge array of native wildlife we are privileged to have on our coast. It also goes a long way to reducing fire risk. In particular, coastal tea tree contains highly flammable oils. So when we remove those woody weeds, it goes a long way towards fuel reduction works.
These dunes are servicing as refuges for our mammals in the Otways. We have lost many of our mammals, especially in the eastern Otways, due to climate change, factors like Phytophthora infestation, and these dunes we found, this is where the mammals are living, and they're very small, so we really want to protect them, and so removal of woody weeds is a great advantage.
These are refuges, and by that we mean these are the last jewels we've got. If we lose these dunes, if we lose this coastal habitat, we've actually had a big impact on many tens of thousands of hectares of our biodiversity in the Otway Ranges.
So often an area that hasn't been maintained for weeds will have a single species in it, looking quite natural, and it is hard for people to come to terms with what we do next, and that is to come in and blanket remove that single species. The area can look quite denuded and void of diversity, but generally what we see is within the first couple of months of that removal of those species is a great deal of seed abundance returning, and that's how we generally approach our sites. We look at natural regeneration over the first year of the site to get a glimpse of what's naturally occurring in that ecosystem, and then based off those ecological vegetation classes and bioregions, we then select species to fill those gaps with revegetation, which we have implemented by friends groups, school groups, and any community member that would love to participate.
As land managers, we don't just manage a patch of weeds. Every time we work on something that's an important threat to ecosystems that we're trying to control, we're actually working at a landscape scale.
So over the next few years, we'll be, as always, referring to the objectives in our coastal vegetation strategy, which underpin every piece of work that we do. And using that as the basis, we'll be looking at each site on an individual basis, because every site has its own set of intricacies that we need to carefully consider before we conduct any kind of weed management. But the ultimate aim is that we significantly reduce the occurrence of woody weeds all along the Great Ocean Road. So community members will be seeing quite a lot of that work underway, and we will be advising and communicating with our communities prior to those works occurring, so that you've got a good understanding of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what the timeline will be.